Hey everyone, welcome back to Edu Expert, your smart learning hub. The vast blue ocean stretched endlessly under the golden rays of the morning sun, and for the crew of a U.S. cargo ship, it seemed like just another ordinary day at sea. The hum of the ship's massive engines, the rhythmic waves crashing against its steel hull, and the salty breeze brushing against their faces gave no indication of the nightmare that was about to unfold. The sailors were going about their duties, some checking navigation systems, others inspecting containers, and a few enjoying the calm serenity of the horizon. They had no reason to believe that danger lurked nearby, no clue that in just a few minutes, their hearts would be pounding in fear and their lives would be at risk. From the shadows of the sea, a threat was approaching, small speedboats carrying armed men who had chosen this ship as their prey. These men were modern-day pirates, hardened by desperation, emboldened by greed, and fueled by the belief that a lumbering cargo vessel was an easy target. To them, this was supposed to be quick and easy: storm the ship, intimidate the crew, take hostages, and demand ransom. But what they didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that high above in the skies, unseen by their eyes and beyond the range of their weapons, the United States Navy was watching every move. The pirates thought they were hunters, but they were already being hunted. This is not just the story of a single ship under attack. It is the story of how piracy continues to haunt the world's busiest trade routes, how seafarers face dangers beyond storms and waves, and how global powers like the United States maintain an invisible shield of security across the seas. For centuries, piracy has been romanticized in books and movies, painted as adventurous tales of treasure and freedom, but in reality, it is a ruthless crime that brings terror to innocent sailors and threatens the stability of international trade. Imagine yourself in the shoes of the crew. The sudden roar of engines as speedboats close in, the sight of masked men waving rifles, the panic as alarms blare, and the desperate question running through everyone's mind: will we survive this? At that very moment, the fate of the crew did not rest solely in their own hands. The unseen presence of U.S. Navy surveillance aircraft, patrolling warships, and rapid response helicopters meant that this was not going to be the pirates' lucky day. This video will take you through the entire sequence, from the history of piracy and why cargo ships are tempting targets, to the chilling details of the attack itself, and finally to the dramatic intervention of the U.S. Navy that turned the tide. You will hear about how pirates operate, how they stalk their victims, and why they continue to pose a threat even in the modern world. And most importantly, you will see how technology, intelligence, and military readiness combine to protect lives and secure the arteries of global commerce. The incident we are about to explore is more than just action on the high seas. It is a lesson in vigilance, a reminder of the dangers that hide in plain sight, and a showcase of the power that watches from above. Pirates may believe the ocean is their playground, but when they cross paths with the U.S. Navy, they discover that the game is already lost. So buckle up, because what started as a calm, ordinary journey across the ocean soon turned into a heart-stopping confrontation where fear, courage, and power collided on the open seas. Piracy is not just a modern-day crime. It is an ancient menace that has haunted the oceans for thousands of years, evolving with time but never disappearing completely. And to understand why those small boats dared to attack a U.S. cargo ship, one must first understand the long shadow cast by piracy across maritime history. From the earliest days when merchant vessels carried spices, silk, and gold across seas, pirates lurked in hidden coves, waiting for their chance to strike. Because unlike navies or traders who followed laws and trade routes, pirates answered only to greed and survival, and the sea, with its vastness and isolation, offered them the perfect hunting ground. Ancient records tell us of pirates in the Mediterranean, terrorizing Roman merchant ships, raiding islands, and even challenging naval powers of their time. The Vikings of Northern Europe were in many ways seafaring raiders, who combined exploration with piracy, striking coastal towns and plundering trade vessels. As global exploration expanded in the Age of Sail, piracy flourished in the Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, and along African coasts, where legendary figures like Blackbeard became infamous. But behind the romanticized image of swashbucklers was the brutal truth. Piracy was about kidnapping, extortion, and bloodshed. Fast forward to the modern era, and one might think with radar, satellites, and international law, piracy would be a relic of the past. But in reality, piracy has resurged in new forms, most notoriously off the Horn of Africa and the Gulf of Aden, where lawlessness on land spilled into the sea. In the early 2000s, Somalia's collapse as a functioning state created a vacuum where armed groups, calling themselves fishermen, but acting as pirates, began hijacking massive oil tankers and cargo ships. Their tactics were simple yet terrifying. Small, fast skiffs with powerful outboard engines would chase down giant but slow-moving ships, ladders hooked to the sides, gunmen climbing aboard, and within minutes, an entire crew could be held hostage. Billions of dollars were extorted in ransom during those years, and insurance rates for shipping companies skyrocketed. International trade routes that connect Europe, Asia, and Africa suddenly became choke points of fear, and governments could no longer ignore it. The U.S. Navy, along with NATO and other international coalitions, launched patrols, escort missions, and direct interventions, but still, pirates adapted, striking farther into the Indian Ocean, sometimes hundreds of miles from shore. Beyond Somalia, piracy has also plagued the Strait of Malacca between Malaysia and Indonesia, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, and even in West Africa's Gulf of Guinea, pirates attack oil tankers and kidnap sailors for ransom. Why do pirates risk their lives against massive ships and powerful navies? The answer lies in desperation, opportunity, and weak law enforcement. Many pirates come from poverty-stricken regions, where the ocean offers the only chance of survival, but survival quickly turns into criminal enterprise once ransom money flows in. A single successful hijacking could earn millions of dollars, a fortune for men with little to lose, and so piracy has remained an attractive but deadly business. For cargo ships, this means constant vulnerability, because unlike warships, they are designed for carrying goods, not fighting battles. Their crews are small, their decks high but accessible, and their weapons, if any, are limited to hoses or flares, making them soft targets in open water. This imbalance is exactly what pirates exploit, turning international waters into their hunting grounds. To fight back, global powers have introduced new measures. Naval convoys, private security teams on ships, razor wire along hulls, long-range acoustic devices to deter attackers, and international laws that allow for the pursuit and prosecution of pirates. Yet the threat has never fully disappeared, because the ocean is simply too vast, and navies cannot be everywhere at once. Every year, the International Maritime Bureau records dozens of pirate incidents worldwide, some small thefts, others violent hijackings, proving that the age-old menace still thrives. When the U.S. cargo ship in our story sailed through dangerous waters, its crew was fully aware of these risks. They had likely conducted anti-piracy drills, rehearsed locking themselves in safe rooms, and trained to send out distress calls, but no training can erase the fear when real pirates approach. The history of piracy is not just a background tale. It sets the stage for why this incident was so tense, why the crew's hearts raced when they saw those approaching skiffs, and why the U.S. Navy's unseen presence above was not just routine surveillance, but a lifeline that connected centuries of naval struggle against piracy with one modern, real-time battle for survival. What happened that day was part of a much larger war, not a war between nations, but between lawful commerce and lawless raiders, between order and chaos on the world's oceans, and it is a war that has never truly ended. The U.S. cargo ship at the center of this story was not just a massive floating box carrying steel containers. It was a vital artery in the endless circulation of global trade, a vessel that represented the lifeline of economies and the invisible connections between continents. Cargo ships like this are the unsung heroes of globalization, silently transporting everything from electronics and automobiles to food supplies and raw materials, without which the modern world would grind to a halt. On the day of the attack, the ship was traveling through a known high-risk corridor, carrying goods that were likely destined for American markets and allies abroad, and its journey was carefully planned, monitored, and timed because every delay in shipping means millions of dollars lost. But unlike warships with rows of cannons or missile launchers, cargo ships are not built for combat. Their design prioritizes volume and efficiency, not defense, which is exactly why they become attractive targets for pirates. The mission of this particular vessel was simple but critically important: deliver its cargo safely across the ocean, on schedule and intact. For the crew on board, this mission meant long hours of work, navigating treacherous waters, monitoring weather systems, ensuring machinery worked flawlessly, and staying vigilant for signs of trouble. They knew they were sailing through a region where piracy incidents had occurred before, and like every professional crew, they had rehearsed anti-piracy measures, such as locking down access points, preparing the citadel or safe room, and maintaining communication with naval forces monitoring the region. Still, there is always a sense of unease, because the sea is unpredictable, and pirates are opportunistic. Unlike in movies, cargo ship missions are not glamorous. They are demanding, exhausting, and often lonely. Weeks or even months at sea mean separation from family, reliance on routine, and the constant pressure of responsibility because one small mistake in navigation or security can have disastrous consequences. Yet every crewman knows they are part of something bigger. Every container stacked on that deck represents industries, businesses, and families waiting for the supplies inside. The mission of a cargo ship is not just commercial, it is strategic, because the steady flow of goods ensures national security, economic stability, and even humanitarian relief in some cases. The United States, being one of the largest economies in the world, depends heavily on these vessels, and any disruption, such as a hijacking or loss of cargo, ripples across global markets. Pirates know this, which is why they target these ships, betting on the fact that companies and governments would rather pay ransom than risk lives or lose valuable cargo. But on this particular voyage, the crew had more than routine monitoring on their side. They had the silent watch of the U.S. Navy above and beyond the horizon, unseen but present. This is important to understand. The cargo ship's mission was peaceful, lawful, and essential to global trade, but it was sailing through waters where lawlessness still thrived. That contrast, between lawful trade and unlawful piracy, set the stage for the dramatic confrontation to come. The men on board were not soldiers. They were civilian mariners, professionals trained in navigation, engineering, and cargo management, not combat. Their mission was never to fight but to deliver. And yet, in dangerous waters, their mission automatically placed them on the front line of a struggle much larger than themselves. Every sailor knew the responsibility resting on their shoulders, every officer understood the risk in those coordinates, and every radio operator stayed alert for signals from nearby naval patrols. The mission of this U.S. cargo ship, therefore, was more than just transporting goods. It was a symbol of resilience against those who seek to disrupt global order. And as the ship pushed steadily across the waves, its engines echoing into the horizon, no one on board could have predicted how soon their peaceful mission would collide with the chaos of piracy. The ocean was calm when the first signs of trouble appeared, so subtle that many of the crew members didn't notice them at first, but to those trained to read the sea, the sudden appearance of small specks on the horizon was enough to send alarm bells ringing. Fast-moving skiffs, the telltale signature of modern pirates, were racing across the waves toward the massive U.S. cargo ship. These boats were small, nimble, and built for speed, powered by outboard motors that screamed as they sliced through the water, and although they looked insignificant compared to the towering steel hull of the cargo vessel, every sailor knew the threat they carried. On board those skiffs were armed men, shouting, gesturing, and waving weapons, men who had likely done this before, emboldened by the knowledge that cargo ships are rarely equipped to fight back. Inside the cargo ship, alarms sounded. The captain's voice echoed through the intercom, ordering the crew to lock down, secure hatches, and prepare for defensive measures. The ship's crew, civilians trained more in navigation than combat, quickly moved into their rehearsed positions, some retreating to the citadel, a fortified room designed to withstand intrusions, others working frantically to send out distress calls to naval forces monitoring the region. The pirates, meanwhile, drew closer, their plan simple but effective: come alongside the ship, throw grappling hooks and ladders, and board before the crew had time to react. From the deck of the cargo ship, sailors could see the determination in the pirates' movements, hear the engines roaring louder as the boats approached, and feel the tension rise with every second. The cargo vessel tried basic evasive maneuvers, adjusting speed and direction, creating waves to destabilize the small boats, while crew members used water cannons and sound devices to deter the attackers. Yet, the pirates pressed forward, confident in their ability to overwhelm a civilian ship. For the crew, it was a terrifying moment. They were unarmed or lightly defended, staring down men with weapons, knowing that if the pirates succeeded in boarding, the entire ship could be taken hostage within minutes. Fear spread through the corridors of the ship like fire, every sailor's heart racing, every hand trembling as they bolted doors and whispered prayers. But even in that moment of fear, they followed their training and stuck to the plan: protect themselves, hold out, and trust that help was coming. What the pirates didn't know, however, was that above them, high in the sky. U.S. Navy surveillance aircraft were already tracking their every move, relaying information back to a nearby warship. To the pirates, the cargo ship looked like an easy catch. To the Navy, it looked like an ambush about to unfold. The confrontation stretched into a dangerous dance, the pirates circling, looking for a weak point, while the cargo ship kept its distance, buying precious minutes. The radios crackled with urgent updates as the crew confirmed their coordinates and repeated their distress signals, hoping rescue forces were already mobilizing. It was a clash of opposites. Desperation versus discipline, lawlessness versus order, small speedboats versus a lumbering giant. For the pirates, time was critical. The longer they stayed exposed in the open sea, the greater the chance of naval intervention, and yet their greed pushed them forward. For the crew, time was survival. Every second they could hold out increased the odds that the Navy would arrive before the pirates could climb aboard. And so, in those tense minutes, the attack played out like a high-stakes chess match on the open ocean, with every move carrying the weight of life and death. The pirates, convinced they were moments away from victory, had no idea that the game was already slipping out of their hands, because far above the horizon, unseen guardians were closing in fast, ready to change the outcome in a way the attackers could never have predicted. What the pirates failed to realize, in their reckless confidence as they sped toward the U.S. cargo ship, was that the sea around them was not as empty as it appeared, and the sky above was not silent, high overhead, far beyond the reach of their eyes or weapons. U.S. Navy surveillance aircraft were circling, their advanced sensors capturing every movement, every turn of the skiffs, every signal coming from the ship below. The pirates believed they had the element of surprise, but in truth, they were already the ones being watched, tracked, and analyzed in real time. Sophisticated drones, fitted with infrared cameras and long-range optics, had been monitoring the corridor for hours, quietly scanning for threats, and the moment the pirates launched their approach, those unmanned eyes locked onto them. Miles away, in a command center aboard a nearby destroyer, U.S. Navy officers watched live feeds, assessing the situation with cold precision, their voices calm but urgent as they coordinated the unfolding response. The pirates could not know that the distress call from the cargo ship had already been received and authenticated, triggering a rapid escalation of naval protocols designed specifically for such scenarios. The pirates thought of themselves as hunters, circling their prey, but in reality, they were like fish swimming into a net woven by one of the most advanced militaries on Earth. Above the clouds, U.S. Navy reconnaissance aircraft mapped the exact speed, heading, and distance of each pirate skiff, transmitting data instantly to warships and helicopters standing by. Even satellites high above the Earth's orbit had joined the silent vigil, tracking the entire scene with pinpoint accuracy. What the pirates didn't know was that the Navy operates as an invisible guardian over international waters, blending intelligence, surveillance, and firepower into a shield that is rarely seen but always present. The crew of the cargo ship, huddled in fear, could not see those aircraft either, but their captain knew from training and from past drills that once a distress call had been transmitted, eyes in the sky were watching, and help was on its way. For the Navy, this was not just about saving one ship, it was about sending a message that piracy, no matter how desperate or determined, would not be allowed to flourish unchecked. The pirates, oblivious to the invisible presence above them, continued to circle, shouting, brandishing weapons, and preparing ladders, unaware that their every gesture was being recorded and relayed to forces moving rapidly toward their location. In their minds, victory was moments away, but in reality, the noose was tightening. Navy helicopters, loaded with armed boarding teams, had already lifted off from a nearby warship, racing low across the waves to intercept, and strike aircraft stood ready as a last resort if the pirates made a move that endangered innocent lives. The sea may have looked wide and empty, but to the Navy, it was a chessboard, and every piece was already in play. The pirates had gambled on secrecy, on speed, on fear, but they had overlooked the one thing that doomed them before they even began: the watchful eyes above. That unseen shield was their undoing, because in the modern world, no act of piracy happens in isolation. Satellites, drones, radars, and reconnaissance aircraft knit together a net so wide that even the fastest skiff cannot escape. As the minutes ticked by, the gap between what the pirates believed and what was truly happening widened until it became fatal. They thought the cargo ship was alone. It was not. They thought no one could see them. They were already surrounded. And they thought they were the hunters, when in fact, from the moment they appeared on the horizon, they were prey under the gaze of the U.S. Navy's invisible guardians. When the distress signal from the U.S. cargo ship was confirmed and the live surveillance feed showed the pirates closing in, the United States Navy moved with the kind of precision and speed that only years of training and unmatched resources could make possible. In the command center of the nearby destroyer, orders were transmitted instantly, radar screens lit up with markers, and within moments the calm hum of the warship gave way to controlled urgency as helicopters roared to life on the flight deck, their rotors slicing the air while armed teams strapped on gear, checked weapons, and prepared to launch. The response was not chaotic but choreographed like a well-rehearsed dance. Every sailor knew his role, every officer executed commands without hesitation, because when lives are at stake in the vast emptiness of the sea, there is no time for second-guessing. Overhead, surveillance aircraft tightened their circles, relaying constant updates of the pirates' positions, while the destroyer itself adjusted course, engines churning the ocean as it closed the distance at maximum speed. At the same time, communication lines buzzed with coordination, the cargo ship's captain receiving reassurances that help was on the way, instructed to keep his crew secured in the citadel, to hold fast for just a few more minutes while the Navy brought its full weight to bear. For the pirates, those minutes felt like opportunity. For the Navy, they were a countdown to interception. The first wave of response came in the form of MH-60 Seahawk helicopters, streaking low across the water, their shadows racing over the waves as they approached the cargo ship. The thundering sound of rotor blades grew louder and louder until it drowned out even the roar of the pirate skiff's engines, and when the gunmetal gray silhouettes appeared on the horizon, it was as if the very sky had split open to reveal the wrath of an invisible guardian. The pirates, once so bold, began to hesitate, their boats weaving uncertainly as the helicopters drew closer, and the gleam of weapons mounted on the aircraft told them in no uncertain terms that the game had changed. Simultaneously, the destroyer's loudspeakers boomed across the sea, issuing clear warnings in multiple languages, demanding the pirates disengage immediately, while Navy fast response boats were lowered into the water, cutting through the waves at blistering speed to close the final distance. Inside the helicopters, Navy boarding teams prepared for the possibility of direct action. Ropes coiled, harnesses secured, night vision gear and tactical radios ready, because if the pirates attempted to board the cargo ship, U.S. forces would rappel down onto the deck and meet them head-on. But the Navy's strength was not just in firepower, it was in psychological dominance. The pirates had expected frightened sailors and unarmed resistance, not the thunder of helicopters overhead, not the sight of an Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer racing toward them with its decks bristling with weaponry, not the knowledge that every move they made was being tracked from the sky. In that moment, their bravado cracked. Some boats peeled away, engines screaming in retreat, while others lingered in confusion, caught between greed and fear. The Navy pressed its advantage, circling helicopters, blinding spotlights sweeping the waves, and fast boats cutting off escape routes. What had begun as an attempted hijacking was rapidly turning into a trap that was closing around the attackers. For the crew of the cargo ship, hidden behind steel doors in their citadel, the sound of helicopters above was the sweetest reassurance they had ever heard. It meant they were no longer alone, that the cavalry had arrived, that the most powerful navy in the world was standing between them and their would-be captors. The U.S. Navy's response was not just about protecting one ship, it was about demonstrating a global promise, that piracy would be met not with fear, but with overwhelming strength and unshakable resolve, a message loud enough to echo across the oceans and into the hearts of anyone who thought of challenging order on the high seas. As the U.S. Navy fast response boats reached the side of the cargo ship and the circling helicopters maintained their watchful presence above, the focus shifted from driving the pirates away to ensuring the absolute safety of the civilian crew, because the mission was not truly successful until every sailor on board that vessel was accounted for, unharmed, and secured. Through the radios, clear instructions were relayed to the captain of the cargo ship, guiding him to keep his crew sheltered until Navy teams confirmed the area was safe, while specially trained boarding units, clad in tactical gear, climbed ladders and secured the decks one section at a time. Each corner of the massive ship was checked with precision, every doorway cleared, every passageway inspected, as the rescue teams moved swiftly but carefully through the industrial labyrinth of containers and steel corridors. The pirates, realizing they were outmatched and surrounded, had already fled or abandoned their attempt, leaving behind the eerie silence of a ship that had narrowly escaped tragedy, and into that silence came the reassuring voices of Navy personnel calling out to the crew, announcing their presence, telling them they were safe now. The moment the Citadel doors opened and the first members of the merchant crew stepped out, blinking into the bright floodlights of the rescue teams, an overwhelming sense of relief washed over the vessel. Men and women who had spent tense hours fearing the worst now found themselves under the protection of some of the most capable forces in the world. Cheers mixed with nervous laughter, handshakes became embraces, and the once frightened crew began to realize just how close they had come to disaster and just how decisively they had been saved. Medical personnel immediately checked the crew for any signs of distress, dehydration, or injury, offering water, food, and comfort as needed, while Navy officers debriefed the captain to ensure all details of the attack were recorded and nothing was left unaccounted for. The ship itself was carefully examined, its navigation systems, engines, and communication equipment tested to confirm there was no damage that could compromise its journey. Every step was deliberate, carried out with the dual purpose of restoring not just physical safety but emotional stability, because the scars of such an ordeal often run deeper than the surface. At the same time, the Navy extended its protective cordon, keeping surveillance aircraft in the sky, destroyer guns trained outward, and fast boats patrolling the perimeter to make absolutely certain no pirate skiff dared return. What stood out in this entire process was the professionalism of the rescue. There was no recklessness, no unnecessary escalation, only calm authority that reassured everyone on board that the threat was not just gone but could never return in the face of such overwhelming protection. The crew, once confined in fear, now walked the decks freely, guided by Navy personnel, speaking with reporters over secure satellite channels, sharing their gratitude and astonishment at the speed of the response. For many, this was the first time they had witnessed the sheer scale of the Navy's reach, how within moments of a distress call, a symphony of warships, aircraft, and personnel had converged to save them. For the families of those sailors back home, news of their loved ones' safety was carried across the world, a message that turned nights of worry into mornings of relief. By the time the cargo ship was officially declared secure, the pirates were nothing but a memory fading into the waves, and the ship's crew, once trembling behind steel doors, now stood on deck under the protective shadow of the American flag flying high above the destroyer nearby. The rescue was more than a tactical victory, it was a human triumph, proof that courage, coordination, and commitment to safety can transform a night of fear into a dawn of hope, and for every sailor on that vessel, the experience became an unshakable story, the night they saw the U.S. Navy not as a distant fleet but as guardians who came from the sky and the sea to protect them when they needed it most. In the end, as the cargo ship resumed its journey under the steadfast protection of the U.S. Navy, the story of that night became far more than just a tale of pirates chasing a vessel and failing in the shadow of overwhelming power. It became a symbol of how preparation, unity, and resolve can prevent chaos from turning into catastrophe, a reminder to the world that while the oceans may be vast and unpredictable, they are not lawless so long as men and women stand guard with courage and discipline. For the merchant crew who lived through the terror, this night would remain etched in their memories forever. The pounding of feet on steel decks, the cold silence behind the Citadel doors, and then the sudden roar of helicopters and flash of naval warships that turned fear into hope, despair into relief. They would carry this experience home and tell their families not just of the danger but of the guardians who answered their call. For the Navy, it was one more mission in a long line of operations that rarely make headlines yet constantly safeguard the arteries of world trade, ensuring that the global economy, which depends on these sea lanes, continues to flow without interruption. And for the world, the incident served as a reminder that piracy, though often seen as a relic of the past, is still a threat lurking in remote waters, a challenge that demands vigilance, cooperation, and readiness from every nation that values freedom of navigation. Yet, perhaps most importantly, this event showed that in moments of crisis, when ordinary people find themselves powerless before danger, the presence of those trained to respond can make all the difference between tragedy and survival. The pirates who set out that night may have thought themselves hunters, but in truth they were blind to the skies above and the waters around them, unaware that they were stepping into a space already watched, already protected, already claimed by a force they could never match. Their attempt was crushed not by brutality but by discipline, not by chance but by preparation, not by one ship but by the vast network of vigilance that the Navy represents across the oceans of the world. As the first light of dawn spread across the horizon and the cargo ship's crew gathered on deck to watch the destroyer keeping pace beside them, they knew they had been part of something larger than their own voyage. They had seen firsthand how nations defend not just borders but the very lifelines of global commerce, how one distress call could summon a shield of steel and sky. And so, the story concluded not with loss but with life preserved, not with chaos but with order restored, and as the ship carried its cargo forward, it also carried an unspoken message, that danger may come, but protection will rise to meet it. For viewers watching this account, the lesson is clear, that courage, vigilance, and unity remain the strongest weapons against fear, and that even in the darkest waters, there are those who stand ready to bring light.